Alrighty, good afternoon. Senior students, how are we doing today? Nice to see you. I hope you're all doing well. Hope everything's starting to fall into place. We're just going to continue here. We're going to continue with this course sort of in this format. Try to have a movie like this for you at least 4 out of 5 days a week. We'll probably Zoom probably 3 days a week, just to make sure you're all set. Again, quizzes and some assignments, we'll start those next week, okay? All right, today, I was asked yesterday what's my favorite part of this course. Well, my favorite part of this course, one of the two favorite parts of this course, is comparing Napoleon to Hitler. And I think over the course of teaching this course, students have always found Napoleon to be a very fascinating character. Okay, so here's what I'm just going to call this Napoleon Part 1 today. Okay, so you should have this cool handout. That was part of the stuff that you got when you picked up. If you don't have this handout, I did. It should be in your module totality thing. Okay, so here we go. Here's basically the format. As you can see, you've been given this piece of paper, and it's got numbers on it, and you can see that the numbers go. It's on 3 pieces of paper, and basically what I'm going to do is, as I go along, I will I've left space, you can see, and so what's going to happen is that I am going to basically when I want to add something of importance, okay, when I want to add something of importance, I'll write number 1, and then you add whatever I write here in this nifty little space, this cool little space that I've left for you between 1 and 2. How's that sound? Okay? All right, so I'm just going to go through this thing as this. This is going to be the only thing I'll leave up on the screen, okay? All right, everybody's heard of Hitler. Everybody sort of knows what Hitler did. Everybody's heard of Napoleon. Of course, in Hawaii, we have the famous Napoleon's Bakery. There used to be, maybe you saw when you were a really young kid, used to be a lot of commercials for Napoleon's Bakery. I don't know if that place is even still open on Oahu or not. But Napoleon is a very fascinating character in there. What I want you to do is I want you to look for similarities as we're going through here the next week or so. What similarities do you see between Napoleon and Hitler? Okay, so here we go. Number 1, let's start this off. So, number 1, one of the things that we know about Napoleon is that he was the ruler of France. All right, he became in essence, literally, the emperor of France. And France had never had emperors. They certainly had kings, and of course we've been talking about that. And when we talk about the Enlightenment, and we've talked about the French Revolution, and of course the king was assassinated. He was put to death. He wasn't assassinated. He was put to death by his people. His queen was put to death by the people. Napoleon is a part of this whole thing, and Napoleon sort of comes in, as you remember, at the end of the short outline of the French Revolution. We sort of got into the fact that there was anarchy going on. Okay, well, there was this guy who was alive at this time, and he was basically, the way for me to put this is he was not from France. Napoleon was from an island in the Mediterranean Sea off the coast of Italy. It's closer really to Italy than it even is France. And this small place was called Corsica. There's 2 islands there. One is called Corsica and one is called Sardinia. Well, Sardinia, does that sound familiar? Guess what's very famous from Sardinia? Yes, that's correct if you're like sardines. I love sardines personally. Corsica is this place. Okay? And number 2, you can see that there's this discussion about his parental units. Okay, so here's how I would sort of say this, and this goes into number 3 as well. The Bonaparte family of Corsica was basically a very well-to-do family in Corsica. On Corsica, how's that sound? That's what we'd say about people of islands. On Corsica, the Bonapartes, right? Bonapartes, that's his last name, okay? The Bonapartes were a very, shall I say, they were a well-off family. Napoleon's father, I think they had, there was 8 children altogether. The mom, Letizia Romolino, was pregnant like 11 times. I think 8 kids survived, some number, that may not be exactly right. But they're very well-to-do, okay, as far as Corsica is concerned. These are not going to be considered, France is in control of Corsica. Napoleon's father is basically a politician. He's a representative. He becomes a representative of Corsica in the French government back in Paris. All right. Napoleon was always mad at his father for basically being a supporter of France, because most people in Corsica did not like France. And that's exactly, very interestingly enough, I might add, that Napoleon did not like France at the beginning. And maybe this is part of the reason. There are two reasons why. Because the French controlled Corsica, sometimes harshly. That's why Napoleon was mad at his father for a long time, because his father supported France. And number two, Napoleon was sent away to Paris. This is number three. He was sent away to military school in Paris by his father. To go to school at age 9. And there's, you send off a 9-year-old and he doesn't see his family at all for 5 years, as you can see, barely at all, as you can see in number 3. And then number 4, what I wanted to say was, he was basically teased and shunned by the kids who were members of really the first and second estates, really second estaters, the aristocratic kids who went to these military schools. Remember, in France, you could not be an officer in the army unless you came from a privileged aristocratic background. While the Bonapartes were, you could argue, aristocrats of Corsica, that didn't matter to the kids of France, the people of France. He was considered a third stater. So I made this little comment about number 4. I usually say, guess what his favorite subject in school was? Here's a hint, it's your favorite subject as well. Yes, he loved to study history. And what I wanted to say is that one of the things now I'm going to jump backwards here just a tad bit, and I'm going to talk about one of his great influences, and that was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, number 5. Okay, now, if you go back to the Philosophes, okay, remember this, the Philosophes of the Enlightenment, okay, so this is the first one we did, and you go back to this handout, the Enlightenment, which we did earlier, okay, and I talked about this, and we highlighted some stuff in here, and I asked you to fill this thing out, okay, and I talked about John Locke and Baron de Montesquieu, okay, I made a couple of notations, and if you recall, this is exactly what number 5 says right here. If you recall, look what I said about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Okay, so let's just briefly go through these things. And remember, these yes or no's have to do with, are these things true in the United States today? Okay, so let's go through some of the views of Rousseau. He said it is unfair that some people are rich while others are poor. Now, isn't this interesting that we got a lot of this being discussed in the paper, in the media today? The rich should not enjoy special privileges. But I would say numbers 1 and 2, historically in America, those things you would say no to. However, as of recent times, we see, and look, there's always been people that would say yes, but now in recent times, this has really come to the forefront, hasn't it? And there's a lot of people that would say, yes, it is unfair. And yes, the rich should not enjoy those types of things. Okay? I would also take a look at number 4. Political reforms must be made before man can be a good person. So what is the argument here Rousseau is making? He's saying that social and political reforms, what's the only thing that can make those things is government. Okay? So you've got a big government guy, all right? This is much different. This is much different than Locke, if you will. Okay? If you compare Locke and you compare Rousseau, you'll see they're very different. Okay, so now, here's the next thing I wanted to do before I proceed. Did you take a look at this Jacobins discussion I wanted you, that I brought up with you in our Zoomer? Some of you were not in the Zoom, I think about 8 out of 10 of you were in it. Okay, the Jacobins, all right, so this is very important, and this goes along with the Philosophes of the Enlightenment. The Jacobins were basically a club, okay? They were a club of students, started off as students in France, that were very interested in the Enlightenment. And the Jacobins basically they just loved Rousseau. And so what I'm going to do is sort of talk about this in a sort of flow chart, because Jacobins, it's a political club where guys would get together, women would come too, and they would discuss politics, and they would discuss ideas of the philosophes, they would discuss ideas of the Enlightenment. And Rousseau, the Jacobins were the ones who were sort of like a big Rousseau fan club. And again, this is the most extreme guy. And so here we go, Rousseau leads directly to the Jacobins, okay? And the Jacobins lead directly to a guy named, if you have to go back and look him up, look, he's on those other, it's spelled this way, Robespierre. And Robespierre was the one who was really the most extreme in the French Revolution. You recall that Robespierre, we are eventually going to be led to the, Robespierre leads us to the reign of terror. And again, if you're confused by what this is all, what I'm talking about here, you got to go back and you got to take a look. Go back and review these things. The reign of terror was this terrible time period where it was really French Civil War. Okay, so what were the Jacobins doing? The Jacobins believed, going back to Rousseau, society had to be cleaned up. Society, we have to get rid of the members of our society who are the problem, so we can proceed. So man can become a good person. Okay, this is number 4. All right, and this is what happened: is that the Jacobins basically went out into the community, went out into society, and they tracked down anybody who was not a full-blown believer in the ideals of Rousseau. And guys like Robespierre, who became really the leader of the French government, led the reign of terror, and this is where you saw all this blood, this guillotining of enemies. Now, I'm going to draw another sort of thing here, and what's going to happen is that we're going to find out that later on, this is going to lead to a guy named Marx, Karl Marx. And Rousseau becomes sort of the foundation for a guy over 100 years later, and a German guy of all things, okay, named Karl Marx, and I think you know who this is. He's the founder of communism. Okay, so these Jacobins we can take a look at. They're not unique to history, but this is a brutal group who went out and searched out for people who disagreed with the thought process of the time. And if you disagreed with them, or if you didn't speak out, or if you said nothing, you were in big trouble and could end up being dead. Marx will have this will have a very profound influence on Marx. Okay, now my point here is, my point I'm trying to make is that this is the kind of guy that Napoleon was interested in. Napoleon found this Rousseau guy fascinating and interesting. All right. Now, one of the things you have to understand is you have to make sure you grasp the idea that there is a civil war in France as a result of the French Revolution. And what you're going to have is you're going to have one side that is the revolutionaries. Okay, they're the ones that want to get rid of the king and move on. That's the Jacobins, that's Robespierre. You're going to have another group of people in France who are the loyalists. The loyalists versus the revolutionaries. Obviously, the loyalists believe in the system that is already going on. So you're going to have a lot of people from obviously the first and second estate who are going to be loyalists. Okay? So what am I saying Napoleon is a part of? Okay, Napoleon is a part, he's got to be looked at as a person of the third estate. He is not, even though he's an aristocratic family, from an aristocratic family of Corsica, he is not an aristocrat of France. So therefore, he is going to be seen as a third estater. Now, here's what starts to happen. Okay? And this is number 6. If his family had been wealthier, if his family had been from France, he might have not had the military career he had. Okay, so remember what, this is very important. If you don't get anything today, get this. Remember, to be a military officer in the French military, you had to be from an aristocratic family. When the revolution starts and the Civil War starts, who were the revolutionaries killing? They were killing people that were aristocrats. And in some cases, they killed military officers. Napoleon survives this because he's from the third estate. And so he is a very good student, and as he gets older, he shows an adept knowledge and ability in military things, okay? And as he is still a young man, guess what happens to his rank very quickly? It goes up and up and up. Why? Because what's happening to his superior military superiors? They're getting killed off in the revolution, okay? So this is exactly my point of number 6. Number 7, I brought this up to you before. Austria and Prussia declare war on the revolutionary government of France. This is very important. They don't declare war on France. They declare war on the revolutionary government of France. And again, if I'm the king of Austria, or if I'm the king of Prussia, and I see a revolution going on in the country right next door, I'm going to be a little uptight, aren't I? Because I don't want that revolutionary fever spilling over my borders and coming to my country, and then I get my head chopped off. Okay? So, the French army's got to go to war. And sure enough, this young general, the guy who really sort of gets his military leadership rank going in his late 20s, okay? He has this job. This is number 8. Okay, maybe I'll put this up here. Number 8. His first job is to attack into Austria. He's supposed to be a decoy. All right, this is number 8. He's supposed to be a decoy. He is supposed to allow other generals to come in and win. Well, the story goes that in one of his very first military activities, as the other general came over the hill to win the battle, to save the French army led by Napoleon, the battle was already over. Because guess who had led a smaller force, a decoy force, to victory over an Austrian army? Napoleon had. Okay? All right. He was very popular with his regular folks, with the regular folks, regular troops, and of course, as you imagine, troops of regular foot soldiers, infantrymen. Regular troops were from the Third Estate, and so he ingratiates himself with them. And here's just an example of what he does. This is number 9. Okay, he gets a military command. He's assigned, and he's named the new leader. And okay, all these troops want to know, okay, what's this new leader going to be like? Well, the first thing he does is he gives all his troops the weekend off. All right, but at the same time, he gives them a week's supply of food. And the key thing I want to point out here is this thing, spirits. Now, in these days, whether you were in the Army or the Navy, you got a daily ration of some sort of alcohol. What this really means is wine. Okay, so he gives his troops a week's worth of food and wine for 2 days off. Well, what do you think happened? Okay, I can guess. Those guys had a good time. All right, and they said, this guy's good. This new leader's a good guy because look what he's done for us. Okay, and so you can see number 10. He really sort of demonstrates how brilliant of a military leader he is. Okay, and one of the things I want to say is he has all these victories over Austria. He's starting to get himself a reputation as being one of France's best generals in his late 20s. Okay, and one of the things how could he win so many battles, Mr. Bryan? What was so smart about him? Okay, so let's go to number 11. Warfare throughout history was usually fought only in the summer. Okay, I want you to think about that just for a moment. History is dictated by agriculture, as I've commented in world history class numerous times, of course. History is dictated by agriculture. So agriculture was not easy. So you needed a labor force to plant the crops, harvest the crops. Okay. So could armies fight in the spring and the fall? Well, they could, but it wasn't a good idea, because what did those soldiers need to do? Well, they needed to go back to their farms and harvest, or they needed to go back to their farms and plant. Okay? So we can fight all summer, but we have to worry about agriculture in those 2 seasons. Do you fight in the winter? No, you don't fight in the winter. It's too darn cold. Of course you don't fight in the winter. So these concepts of warfare throughout history are, you only fight in the summer, okay? You fight in daylight. Remember, we line up 2 armies across the field from each other, and we march at each other or run at each other, and we slam into each other and fight hand to hand. Okay, so this is number 11. Napoleon didn't do that. He would attack at night. He would move his army at night. He would attack in the rain, which was unheard of. He would attack On Sundays, oh God, you never did that throughout history. There was never a battle on Sunday. Sunday was a day of rest. Okay? Especially in the AD time period. All right? So what I always say is think of Washington crossing the Delaware. This famous picture, this is an example, and of course Washington and Napoleon were alive at the same time. They sort of thought similarly on these things. And of course, what is happening in this famous painting? Of course, it didn't exactly happen like this, but maybe you know this, maybe you don't. George Washington was able to get the Continental Army across the Delaware River, his entire army, in secret. And the next day, he attacked a larger force. They were actually Germans who were fighting for the British, and he wiped out this force of Germans. It was this great victory that many people think sort of swung the tide of the American Revolution in favor of Washington and the Continental Army. Okay, well, when did he do this? Well, he did it at night. Okay? What night did he do it? He did it the night of Christmas Eve, the night of December 24th and the morning of the 25th. Okay, a holiday. All right? Obviously, it's the winter. You can see these guys are supposedly moving blocks of ice out of the way so the boats can get across. Okay, so this is not normal of history. This is not the way it was always done. And so that's what I sort of want you to think about when you think about these different tactics. Okay, and his guys love him. Number 12, he was given a nickname. His nickname was Le Petit Corporal. Le Petit means the small, the short, the tiny. And this goes back to something that maybe you know about him, and that is that he was not a very tall guy. He was probably about 5'6", not the tallest man. There weren't super tall people in those days, so he's not a little person, if you will. He was just nicknamed the Little Corporal. Why? He wouldn't lead from behind. He would be often very much at the front. He apparently was not afraid of cannonballs blowing up near him. Everybody else would jump. He would stand firm, and so they liked him for that. Okay, and so these battles go on, and eventually what happens is that you can see here in number 13. I would say number 13 is very important, and that has to do with the ability of propaganda to convince people to believe in you. And so he was a master at propaganda. He actually printed. He had a printing press with him wherever he went, on whatever battle he went, and not at the front, of course, but he would print newspapers for his troops, number one, but number two, he would print a newspaper to be distributed across France, and he controlled this newspaper, and he controlled the guys who wrote for this newspaper, and so he could therefore control the message. And of course, we see the importance of media today as well. Okay, and so I just want to finish off with number 14, this famous event. One of the things, what basically happens is the British get involved. The British get involved in on the Austrian and Prussian side, and Napoleon by this time is risen not just up the ranks of the military, but he's risen up the ranks of the French revolutionary government, and he's just below the surface, and he is sent to Egypt to go and fight the British and see if he can seize Egypt for the French. And he wins a major decisive battle there. It's called the Battle of the Pyramids. He's victorious at the battle, literally in the shadow of the pyramids. And one of the things I wanted you to know, number 14, is that, do you remember the Rosetta Stone? It's this thing right here. The Rosetta Stone, ladies and gentlemen, was this famous piece of artwork that deciphers Egyptian hieroglyphics. Remember, nobody could read Egyptian hieroglyphics until this thing was found. And basically, one of these is in Greek, and one of these was in a modern Egyptian language. They both said the same thing, and therefore it was figured out that this must say the same thing, and eventually Egyptian hieroglyphics was cracked. The idea was cracked. They figured it out, what it all meant. So, the French are responsible for it. Now, he is not victorious in Egypt, and the French troops and the French Navy, the British won a decisive naval battle called the Battle of the Nile. And the French had to hightail it out of there and escape. And the Rosetta Stone fell into the British hands. That's why, if you want to see the Rosetta Stone, you got to go to London to see it. Okay, which isn't all bad at all. And I've seen it. It's totally worth your time to go see it. Okay, all right. So let me stop there with Napoleon number 1. Okay, Napoleon part 1. So here is what I would like you to look up to add to this. This will be your own sort of main thing to look up. I want you to look up, so here was your first one, the Jacobins. Okay? I want you to look up who this person is. Her name is Josephine de Beauharnais. All right, I want you to look her up. That's your new one to look up today. Okay? All right, now, with that, I will stop talking, and but the next time I see you, we will continue with the discussion of Napoleon. Okay? Remember, these Jacobins were bad guys. Okay? Josephine. I bet you can figure out who she is. All right, everybody. Thank you very much. Hope you found today's discussion interesting. We'll continue with it as we go along. Oh, here, well, let's just throw up some. I think you have some of these. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. Here we have a picture of Napoleon. How about this? We'll end with this. Here is a famous painting of Napoleon as a young general. As a young man, probably deep into his 20s by now, but he is already recognized as a formidable military mind, formidable leader, somebody who's not afraid to take risks, not afraid of danger, and whose men loved him very much. Okay? All right. Thanks. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon. Aloha.